Thanks, Steven. I know we've been working on this kind of series. I actually feel like these series are really informative. I think I told you too how we're reading the book, distilling out the key points, and then putting it in this white paper, but also doing it in this kind of video form. It'd be like consumable. So thank you for creating the white paper and always kind of helping us internally. And we're just allowing everyone to see a little bit about a little sneak peek on how we kind of teach each other. Um, Stephen, I know you read this book and you kind of are using it as kind of like this guide for these 7 questions. And Peter Thiel, in some ways, we heard him speak at USC, and it kind of introduced us a little bit way of thinking about just how you look at your startup. So thank you, Stephen. I'll hand it off to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Kurling. So yeah, if you haven't had a chance to look at our first 2 videos, feel free to check them out. But basically what we're doing is, so we have a kind of this idea of learning that happens internally for us at Fokcus, and we want to make this more forward facing. So we want to be able to pass on some of this knowledge to startups and entrepreneurs out there, things that we've learned, or at least get that conversation going and help us learn along the way too. So that's the gist of what's happening here. We know that there's a lot of great veteran entrepreneurs out there that have tried at defining principles of success in one way, shape, or another, usually based on their own personal knowledge, experiences, and whatnot. A great example of this was, like Curly mentioned, Peter Thiel's book, 0 to 1. And in that book, he mentioned 7 questions a business must answer. And those questions, while they are great at, point blank, there's a lot of great central themes that exists, if you take a step back from those questions, that really help you really take a step back and look at your startup in a different light. Finding answers to those questions not only helps you with, realizing your own vulnerabilities as a startup or as an entrepreneur, but also to help you find sustained success, right? These are great questions. And so today we're going to go over the third question, which is the monopoly question. So this question is, are you starting with a big share in a small market? So there's a big importance with starting small. In the words of Peter Thiel, what he mentioned in his book, he said, you must solve a particular problem in a superior way. In other words, monopolizing a unique solution for a small market. If you can't do that, you'll be stuck in kind of a cycle of vicious competition. Now, there's a lot of reasons why competition may be a good thing, but ultimately, in terms of startups and businesses, avoiding competition is an aim for a lot of successful businesses. If you can separate yourself from competition, you're going to find sustained success over the long term. And so this monopoly question comes into play a lot. One of the big ways to do that is to strive for monopolistic advantages. So are you starting with a big share in a small market is one way to look at it. When Facebook started, they did not start becoming the Facebook of everything we know today. They started with just this small group of people on a college campus, and then it grew from there. They started with a big share in a small market, at Harvard, right? And then it expanded from there and over time developed into what it is today. So they were able to answer that monopoly question quite well, or at least come up with a strategy to exploit, monopolistic advantage to allow them to be successful, over the long haul, right? Now, things to watch out for: exaggerating your own uniqueness gets you nowhere in this setting, right? Given enough time, the truth always finds a way out. So if you're kind of exaggerating your answer to this question, you're going to be exploited for that eventually, whether it's you or the market or whatever that may be. An example of this, kind of on the other side of success, or not answering this question being a driver to failure, is we're going to expand on an example with the clean tech bubble. Now in the first question we use that as an example, but we're going to come at it from a different angle. So when the clean tech bubble happened in the early 2000s, just about every startup in that space really exaggerated their impending impact they were going to have on technology. They knew green technology was the way to go, and so because this was kind of at the forefront of of everyone's minds, it was always the justifiable thing. So, okay, everyone's going green, it's a great opportunity. But it had nothing to do with, how are you actually creating a big share in a small market? How are you actually going to create a monopolistic advantage? Now, in hindsight, this bred a market full of competition, right? Which is just ultimately a race to the bottom when all the active players are really just making minimal incremental improvements over existing technology. And ultimately, it ends up being a recipe for disaster. And so, as an entrepreneur, you can learn from situations like this and really look at, am I exaggerating my own uniqueness or my own, monopolistic advantage that I think exists within my startup or my business or my business venture? And what does that look like? Am I really starting with a big share in a small market and then expanding from there? Do I really have a monopolistic advantage that separates me from my competitors? In addition to, let's say, the answers to the other questions we're going to mention in this video series. Now, something I did want to pose to you, Kurling, since I know that you're one of our veteran, mentors. How would you apply this to someone you're mentoring? Because I know you've talked about this with a lot of startups that we've interacted with.
Yeah, and we just had a session this week with a veteran cohort at East Coast, and it's pretty much like a pitch deck session, Steven. We kind of went over some of the major slides, the 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30-point font, went through the gamut of what each slide is. But one of the slides that was really crucial for kind of strategy, like this kind of business strategy, is called this TAM slide. It's a total addressable market. It's usually this huge bubble, right? And it has like 2 billion, addressable market or something like that. But there's always these kind of subsets of this huge market, like you said in Facebook was connecting all, but the subset of it, or that target or SOM, is usually something very small. It was just Harvard, like you said, right? And then he expanded on to even a little bit bigger. Maybe it was just Yale and just the private Ivy League. But the key thing is actually dominating just the Harvard was the key part, right? And you can learn from it. And that's a key thing about what Peter's saying. You can learn from monopolizing one small market, and these adjacent markets, it'll be a little bit more easier to expand to once you actually learn and understand all these kind of lessons learned. So that's one way I would say, using it as a kind of like a strategy, and very specifically, even in your pitch deck, explaining what that strategy is, using kind of like the TAM, SAM, and SOM. So that's a little bit what we've been working with some of the startups on, but that kind of helps apply some of these concepts to something more tangible.
Yeah, and I think as with most of these questions, if you can look at businesses today that have had success, so think of Amazon, for example. If you can look at businesses and say, okay, how did they answer these questions? That really helps you as an entrepreneur really come up with a more robust answer to this question in your own life, right? Learning from others. You talked about Harvard, you alluded to, in terms of your own mentoring experience, how that gets addressed with startups. Think about Amazon. Did Amazon start with the same idea of a target market that they have today? Not by a chance, right? They decided to, or the idea initially was to have a big share in a small market. They wanted to be a dominant force as a book broker, right?
Good point.
As a bookstore, right? So they ended up being just this huge dominant player in that market. And then they had a roadmap to expand to adjacent markets. So they created that monopolistic advantage, and then were able to build on that, build on that great answer to this monopoly question.
Yeah, that's a great example. I think we have Professor Sam Clark at Cal State San Marcos. He always says, we want you guys to be the Amazon of books first before the Amazon of everything. Focus on one thing. So that's good. That's great, Stephen.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, Kurling?
Well, I think the main thing is really easy for people to think about being the Amazon of everything, right? You have all these ideas and these things, but it's very difficult actually to really be focused on a market or on a product. So I think that's the one key thing, and that's part of our name is focus. It's just focusing on one thing, right? And monopolizing it and learning it. from it, right? I think that's the key thing I've kind of thought about as we kind of had this kind of dialogue. But anything else, Steven?
Yeah, as always, thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you have a chance, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts, whether it's a question or whatever that may be. We want this to be a back and forth dialogue, right? So we want to learn from you as much as you might want to learn from us. So if you want to start that conversation, feel free to leave a comment. Hit that subscribe button. All the interactions we get from videos like this help push it out to more people, improve our reach. So if you have a chance, that like or that comment that you leave us could help this video be pushed out to an entrepreneur who really needed to hear about this Monopoly question today, right? Might bring them some great insight that could help them out quite a bit. So it's an easy way to give back if you have a chance to do so. But as always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next part of the series.
All right. Thanks so much, Steven. Take care.